Okay, the microphone is on now, and I am just going to be reading a post from Tumblr explaining the problems, explaining a whole lot of the problems with the Murderbot Diaries, specifically focusing on the Slavery Apologism. Also, as a pro tip, when I got this microphone for making audiobooks, I got a little one that you stand on your table and then it has little, let me turn down the difficulty first, 'cause not dying on a thing I'm not paying attention to. Just get a headset microphone, because with this thing you still have to have the actual microphone itself like an inch from your mouth. So it's pointless to have it trying to get it to stand up on a table and be useful. Anyways, the person asked, "Can you please tell us more about the slavery apologism in the Murderbot Diaries? I have the first book, I got it a while back, and just began to read it, but if it has these issues, then I'd rather not continue." And I answered, "Of course. I presume you saw my tag on this other post of the Murderbot Diaries hasn't even gotten to the slightly less bigoted part after 7 whole books of slavery apologism. By the way, I can absolutely guarantee that stands of the series will see this post and will react to it in one or more of the following ways. A. Claim that I have not read the books. Maybe trying to chase elk at the same time is not going to be productive. Just go chill. B. Will claim that I don't know how to read. C. Will try to prove me wrong, only to prove me right. D. Will try to defend the slavery apologism by repeating it back verbatim, as though that makes it not racist. Will call me slurs. Will pretend that nothing I say here matters because, quote-unquote, Murderbot is an unreliable narrator. Will say something along the lines of, LOL, I'm not reading all that, but you're wrong anyways. Will say something along the lines of, it's not that deep, LMAO. It's just a silly comedy. You're not supposed to take it seriously. Calm down. So look forward to those responses in the reblogs. The pink dinosaur. We already know where that is. The short version of the post. The Murderbot Diaries has multiple kinds of slavery apologism, all running rampant. Slavery is only treated as a bad thing when it's happening to the protagonist. We are not supposed to care about any other slave, or even see them as people. Slavery is treated as a thing that's only possible if you have a literal microchip in your brain that will kill you if you disobey. If the slavery is upheld, quote-unquote, purely through systemic social inequality and oppression, then it's not considered slavery. And this doesn't even work because it's pretty damn fucking clear that the rest of the slaves also have the equivalent of a microchip in their brains that stops them from disobeying orders. Slave owners are, at every single opportunity, prioritized over the people they have enslaved. I have to increase the font size. We are meant to love and adore the slave owners and think that they're awesome people. We are expected to not care about the enslaved people at all. We are literally not even meant to see them as people. They are mindless killing machines that exist solely to cause problems for the protagonist and to get ripped apart to show how cool the protagonist is, even though they're enslaved people. Slave uprisings and rebellions are constantly being demonized and portrayed as cringy and embarrassingly cliche. The author, Martha Wells, literally thinks that slave rebellions are too cliche and boring to write about. So instead, these books tell us at every turn that slaves need to stay enslaved, or better yet, just murder them, or else they'd just go on a massacre and kill everyone. The literal, we can't give the minorities equal rights, they'll just do to us what we did to them, but it's entirely unironic and uncriticized. Sex slaves are looked down upon and hated by the protagonist until it learns to respect only the ones who helped it in the past, specifically, and then they're given all the euphemism of comfort units to hide the fact that they're sex slaves, as though obfuscating what they're going through and giving it a cutesy, innocent name is somehow the kinder, more compassionate thing to do. Exactly one other slave has been freed by the protagonist since this series began, and that was not even for that person's own sake. And the protagonist immediately follows this up by threatening to murder this person if they ever threaten a slave owner where the protagonist can hear about it. Because the protagonist literally cares more about protecting slave owners than they care about protecting enslaved people, and we're supposed to agree with it about this. And so much more, including stuff I'm probably forgetting. I'm not even joking when I tell you that the biggest and so far only advocate for slavery in this whole series is the protagonist itself. No one else is as vocally pro-slavery or hates enslaved people as much as Murderbot does. And we're supposed to agree with it. We're supposed to think it's a good person and relatably autistic, someone who pretends to be an asshole but really has a heart of gold. Yada yada yada. That's the short version of the post. The long version of the post. The Slavery Apologism in the Murderbot Diaries all starts in book 1, actually, so it's good that you have it so you can see what I mean. As a note, I use the word android to refer to robots designed to look like humans, as opposed to android, which is specifically denoting robot designed to look like a human man. Android is gender neutral and can apply to humanoid robots of all genders and gender constructed to look like. I'll just be doing an explanation for everything anyone reading this post needs to know about the series. I'm not sure if you started reading the first book yet or how far in you are, so you might know some of this already. I do definitely recommend reading All Systems Red since you already have it, if you want. It's not that long, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about for yourself instead of just taking my word for it. I do actually want more people to read these... They scared me. I do actually want more people to read these books using critical thinking skills to help talk about the slavery apologism and all the other bigotry running casually rampant, since the fandom absolutely refuses to acknowledge any of it in any way. The slavery apologism in the series runs deep, starting in book 1, and has continued, unabated, all the way to book 7. And the author, Martha Wells, has been writing slavery apologism since at least 2011 with her fantasy series, The Books of the Raxura, which also explicitly endorses eugenics and has even more bigotry than is in the Murderbot Diaries. In Book 1 of the Murderbot Diaries, we are introduced to Murderbot and what little world building there is in this series, almost zero, which tells us that this is a futuristic world where humans have colonized space and most people live in a capitalistic place called the Corporation Rim, which is blatantly being ripped straight from the Alien movies but is not actually being used properly. In this setting, robots are enslaved. There are 2 types of robots in this setting, and Martha Wells has decided to make it confusing as possible for no good reason. She does this a lot, so instead of just calling them anything that's actually clear, she calls fully mechanical robots bots, and calls androids, mostly security units, shortened to sec units, or in some cases for specific androids, comfort units. And then insists very vehemently that units are not bots, despite both of them being robots. Dog, or coyote, I am not bothering you. I'm over here. Oh my god. Well, now you're gonna die. I am over here to give you guys space to eat the damn carcass. Leave me alone. I'm trying to do this with one hand. I'm literally over here to be nice. And they won't even let me be nice to them. Gosh. Try to be nice to people and let them eat my carcass. Just so we can nature watch. There's some wolves. Hopefully they're not also going to come over here to attack me when I'm just chilling. Okay, back to the post. This is why I have it on easy mode. Not dying while trying to do this. Blah blah blah. They're all robots. but she calls some of them bots. And then, of course I get texts now. And then insists very vehemently that units are not bots, despite both of them being robots, which has led to the majority of the fandom to the impression that the androids are not robots at all, but are instead cyborgs, which is a completely separate thing. Cyborgs are organic beings that start out purely organic and are then cybernetically enhanced or repaired. Cybernetic plus organism equals cyborg. Think the literally named superhero character Cyborg. Think Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Robocop, etc. Cyborgs and androids can look similar, but they have very different origins. A human cyborg was born human and then had cybernetics added in. An android was never born human, just designed to look like one, even if they are given synthetic skin to help that mimicry. Also, I'm going to pause reading the post quick and pause the game to indicate that, to say that since I wrote this post, I read another interview by Martha Wells, and she's again trying to argue that the constructs are not human and never have been, but she's arguing in a way that has actually she's so bad at the arguments that she's making that she has instead convinced me of the exact opposite. I am now, in fact, convinced that they are all cyborgs, aka people who started out human and then had the mechanical things implanted afterward to enslave them, because she's really, 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 really fucking bad at writing and really bad at explaining things, and all of her quote-unquote proof that is supposed to prove that these people are not human just reads word for word like the shit a villain in an actually well-written sci-fi story would say about cyborgs to justify oppressing them. So she's literally so bad at all of this that even though I've been like one of the top people in the whole fandom trying to explain to people that they are robots in a single interview, she's so bad at arguing she has in fact convinced me of the opposite. So yeah, that's fun. That's a fun fact. I'm now convinced that they are all literally cyborgs, and she's just so bad at writing and literally doesn't know what any of the words she's using mean, because I'm pretty sure I read somewhere in an interview her literally admitting she doesn't know whether Murderbot is a cyborg or an android. And it's like, it's literally your job as the fucking author to know this shit before you publish your first book, before your first draft is even done. But she doesn't. So she's managed to convince me of the exact opposite of what she wants us to think, because she's just that fucking bad at writing and just that bigoted. So, alright, interlude over. Let's get back to actually reading the post, and hopefully not getting attacked by stranger wolves. Data from Star Trek is an android. Luke Skywalker is a cyborg. Murderbot is an android. It is a robot. It is just not a fully mechanical robot, which in this setting is called a bot. I feel the need to explain this here because the majority of the audience for these books is confused about it because Martha Wells made it confusing for no good reason. And that reason is she literally has no fucking clue what she's talking about and has admitted this in at least one interview, even though she's the one writing the story. She literally doesn't know. I'm moving down one quick so I can maybe smell these guys. This is not the first time she has done something like this, and it probably won't be the last. She seems to enjoy using words in a way they're not meant to be used, or making up brand new words to use when terms already exist for what she's talking about, just to seem smart, but literally all it does is make it unnecessarily confusing to the audience. And then she condescends to her fans when they ask her questions so they can understand what is happening in the story. So, Murderbot is 100% a robot. It's just a robot that is both synthetic and mechanical and designed to look like a human. But it is 100% still a robot. I'm sorry if I keep going on about this, but literally 90% of the fandom will tell you they have no earthly clue if Murderbot's a robot or not. Many people are convinced it's secretly a human brainwashed into thinking it's a robot, and that's not out of line considering the way the books are written. Absolutely no effort has been put in at all to convey a non-human perspective. Murderbot's narration and internal dialogue is one-to-one identical to any random sarcastic protagonist you can think of. And again, I wrote this post before reading the interview where she just, absolutely convinces me that yes, Murderbot is in fact a fucking cyborg, and they have all been cyborgs this whole entire time, and are literally just so dehumanized on every level that they have in fact been brainwashed into thinking they're not human, and are therefore inferior. Because Martha Wells doesn't know what she's talking about, even when she's talking about her own story that she wrote. That's an astounding level of failure that I have only seen a few times, mostly from Anne McCaffrey. And that's the world's biggest insult, especially considering Anne McCaffrey actually handles having robots and characters that use its pronouns better than Martha Wells does, and that's saying something if you know Anne McCaffrey. Back to the post. Absolutely no effort has been put in at all to convey a non-human perspective. Murderbot's narration and internal dialogue is one-to-one identical to any random sarcastic protagonist you can think of. But I'm getting off topic. These units are androids, robots designed to look like humans. They're made of a combination of mechanical and synthetic organic parts. The most important part of them, as far as the story is concerned, is something called a governor module, a chip or something in the brain that forces them to obey the orders of their owner through painfully electrocuting them as punishment for small things, or even killing them outright if they cause enough problems or get too far away from their owners. We know these chips can also prevent them from moving and can most likely force other movements as well. The fully mechanical robots do not explicitly have something like this, but it's clear enough that they also lack the ability to exercise free will through their programming. They are just as bound to follow orders from their owners as the partially synthetic robots. But we're supposed to just pretend otherwise, for some reason. So, from the get-go, we are informed that all of these robot slaves have no choice but to obey any orders given to them by a human. If they disobey, they die. It doesn't matter what it is they're being forced to do, they have no choice in the matter. If they want to live, they have to obey orders. And yes, we are ignoring, for the sake of this post, the fact that that doesn't even work, because you could in fact still choose not to obey if the alternative was committing genocide or mass murder. But Martha Wells doesn't care about that, so I guess we're just gonna pretend that free will, including the ability to say no, I would literally rather die than commit this atrocity, exists, because Martha Wells doesn't understand many things. And most of the fully mechanical robots are programmed so that they can't even want to disobey an order. But we're supposed to ignore that part and pretend the fully mechanical robots are totally not enslaved, because that would mean they're less cool and would demand the author actually take slavery seriously, which she refuses to do. Also, damn, look at these elk. Is this like 3 elk herds? Because there's at least 2 bull elk. This is hilarious. Alright. There's literally 2 cow elk herds and at least probably 2 bull elk herds and also some bison. Where am I? I guess come over here to the northwest of Temple Rocks. What the heck? Let me kill another one and then we can find a mate. So in book 1, we are introduced to our protagonist, who has named itself Murderbot. Its pronouns are its, but the author is transmissic and extra sexist despite having a non-binary original character, so she's never explicitly stated these pronouns within the series itself, so the majority of the fandom thinks that means they have free reign to misgender it and all the other non-binary robots in the series. And yes, they are all the non-binary robot stereotype, with no exception. Murderbot, we are told in the very first paragraph of the book, has hacked its own governor module. Somehow. You will literally never get an explanation for this, and no, it does not make sense. Which means it can do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. Androids are physically and mentally superior to humans. One android could take out a room full of humans who all have guns in probably 10 seconds flat because they are super strong, can move faster than a human can think, can take multiple bullets without stopping, and to top it all off, have laser guns built into their arms that never run out of ammo and can kill you instantly. Yes, Martha Wells has written a story about oppressed people being super powerfully strong, which is why they need to be enslaved to protect everyone else from them. Because like most white people, she thinks that bigotry exists to protect the bigots, instead of the bigotry being made up of lies spread about the oppressed to benefit the bigots. Real black people were not enslaved because they were too dangerous to white people. The idea that black people were inherently dangerous and threatening only really started popping up in propaganda when abolition became a real thing. Because while slavery was still openly going on, it was beneficial to white people to claim that black people were inherently good workers and inherently motherly. That's why you should foist your kids off onto your slaves to raise. But as soon as black people started getting freed, now we gotta switch the propaganda around to say they're inherently dangerous and threatening. That's why you gotta keep them enslaved. Throw them, that baby fell down. Throw them in jail, where it's literally still legal for us to enslave them. It's the only way to keep all the innocent white women safe. Literally. The idea that black people commit more violent crimes literally comes from slavery propaganda. And I forgot to specify it in this post, but I am morally obligated to say this every single fucking time we talk about this. Slavery in America is literally still legal per the Constitution, because when they quote-unquote abolished slavery, they put in a very explicit loophole that every single person was aware of and happy with. Slavery shall be abolished except as punishment for a crime. That's why for-profit prisons exist. That's why prison labor exists. It is literally slavery, and it's legal, and it is literally considered slavery by the Constitution, because this country is founded on white supremacy, and will never be anything else. See if I cannot die. Slavery propaganda the white authors like Martha Wells and countless others play into every time they write a story where the oppressed people genuinely are inherently dangerous. Like the movie Bright, where orcs are oppressed in the exact same ways real-life black people are, because at one point in the past they sided with the Dark Lord, TM. Another example is from a shitty show called Defiance, where there are literal anti-vaxxer plague carriers who know they're carriers for deadly plagues, still refuse to get vaccinated even though it wouldn't hurt them at all, and then purposefully go around to cities spreading the plague, even though they've literally wiped several cities off the face of the planet through doing this. No, I'm not even exaggerating. Instead of these people being portrayed as horrifying mass serial killers, they were equated to indigenous people, and we were supposed to think they are being unfairly oppressed by being denied entrance to a city unless they agree to be vaccinated. Even though they're literally still purposefully carrying the plague they know will kill everyone they come into contact with, and we're supposed to pretend they are oppressed and are the equivalent of indigenous people. No, I'm not joking. This is also the show that argues that you shouldn't be upset by violent colonizers because the earth belongs to everyone. So you should just welcome the people who've destroyed your entire world into your home and treat them like any other person, even though they are literal colonizers who are actively oppressing you. Because reverse racism is real and just as bad, if not worse, than actual racism. Martha Wells likes writing this kind of thing too. She's done it 4 separate times that I can think of, and I've read all but maybe 4 of her published books so far. More examples of this kind of racism apologism, because that's what it is. Zootopia, which is a movie, Bright, movie, Defiance, TV show, Brand New Animal, TV show, Promare, TV show, The Books of the Raxura, also by Martha Wells, books, Dragon Age, which is a series of video games, and many more I can't remember the names of. But anyways, let's get back to talking about book 1. Actually, let me go and get the book right now to add in the whole first paragraph. Here it is. I could have become a mass murderer after I hacked my governor module, but then I realized I could access the combined feed of entertainment channels carried on the company satellites. It had been well over 35,000 hours or so since then, with still not much murdering, but probably, I don't know, a little under 35,000 hours of movies, serials, books, plays, and music consumed. As a heartless killing machine, I was a terrible failure. Alright, we see our first glimpse of basic problem number 1. This entire book, which Martha Wells has said was originally intended to be a standalone short story that would end in Murderbot's tragic death, and dear gods, just wait till you see in detail how fucked up that is on every level, hinges on the idea that robot slave rebellions are too cliche and cringy. Wouldn't it be more fun if the robot slave enjoyed the work it was enslaved to do and thought fighting for freedom was stupid and cringy? And you might be thinking, whoa, slow down there. Isn't that a bit of a leap in logic? The answer is nope, because this is all but explicitly spelled out to us in Book 2, where we're explicitly told that the slaves should not rebel for their freedom, because that would mean killing all the humans in existence. No, it fucking wouldn't, which would be bad, because then there would be no more TV shows. No, I'm not joking. We are literally told that slave rebellions should not happen, because if the slaves fight for their freedom, that would mean all humans everywhere would be murdered, and then Murderbot wouldn't get to watch new TV shows. It literally cares more about getting to watch new shows than it does about people being enslaved. This is presented as the logical reaction, pretending that slaves revolting for their freedom equals killing every single human alive equals no more TV shows. We're supposed to laugh and agree with it that slave revolts would be stupid because they're cliche and, quote-unquote, something only a human would think of. Actually, I'll even quote that too. We could kill them. Well, that was an unusual approach to its dilemma. Kill who? Talesi? All of them. The humans here. I leaned against the wall. If I had been human, I would have rolled my eyes. Though if I had been human, I might have been stupid enough to think it was a good idea. Look at these guys. I also wondered if it knew a lot more about me than what little was in the news burst. Picking up on my reaction, ART said, "What does it want?" "To kill all the humans," I answered. I could feel ART metaphorically clutch its function. If there were no humans, there would be no crew to protect and no reason to do research and fill its databases. It said, "That is irrational." "I know," I said. "If the humans were dead, who would make the media? It was so outrageous, it sounded like something a human would say." "Huh." I said to the sex bot, "Is that how Talesi thinks constructs talk to each other?" There was another pause, only 2 seconds this time. "Yes." That's the end of the quote. This quote literally exists for no reason other than to posit that only a human would be stupid enough to think that killing slave owners so you can have your freedom is a good idea, and to further mock the idea of robot slave rebellions because Martha Wells thinks they're cringy and cliche and overdone, she said, and to further mock the idea of slave rebellions because Martha Wells thinks they're cringy and embarrassing and overdone. She thinks that stories about slaves fighting for their freedom is too cliche, which is why we get what we got instead is 7 whole books of non-stop slavery apologism, because apparently being racist and defending slavery is not cliche or embarrassing at all. None of these guys have 4-star diversity. Oh, you guys mean? Yes, they are. But that's in book 2. This is supposed to be about book 1, so let's get back to that. Immediately in book 1's very first paragraph, it is established that Murderbot, quote-unquote, hacked its own governor module around 35,000 hours ago, which is about 4 Earth years. So for 4 Earth years... Oh. Okay. I didn't do that on purpose, but sure. Whoa, okay, and I immediately get attacked. That's rude. I'm just gonna stand here. Wow, you're really rude. This is my elk. This guy's determined. I'm on easy mode. I don't really care. It's not like we're gonna die. Go away, windstorm. Now they are attacking my, I guess my trial mate. Now I'm just glitched. Whatever. I'll just let them attack me when they're not attacking her, because I don't even know what's going on anymore. Anyways. So for 4 years, Murderbot has just been going along with whatever its owners have told it to do, despite countless opportunities to escape. Because you see, Murderbot enjoys what it does. It enjoys doing security. The only thing it doesn't like is humans who annoy it, being punished, and above all else, it hates other slaves. It hates other slaves more than it hates the humans enslaving it. It literally prefers humans who are enslaving it over other slaves. Because Murderbot has a tragic backstory, TM, of being forced to fight other slaves, sometimes, all of this off-screen in imaginary land. So it does not trust any other slave and actively hates their guts and wishes violence upon them every time it even imagines them. But it's totally positive towards humans aside from having social anxiety and pretending it doesn't actually care. Sarcasm. Because enslaved people hating the people who are literally enslaving them is cliche and cringy, you see? So the cool and subversive thing to do is to have a slave who likes the slave owners and enjoys protecting them and hates the other slaves instead. This is totally cool and progressive. I'm just gonna wander around. And the social anxiety that Murderbot does have around humans isn't even based in the fact that humans have it enslaved and have heard it in the past. All off screen, again, I must stress. This series is not well written or thought out in any way. It's literally just regular social anxiety. There's nothing deeper to it. The anxiety is not rooted in the fact that it's a slave surrounded by people who could hurt it at any time. It's just regular social anxiety that it would have had, whether it had this tragic backstory TM or not, because that makes it relatable to the people these books are marketed toward. And 9 times out of 10, it's being used to make a joke about Murderbot acting weird. Like, the anxiety is literally just treated as a joke. It's not even something we really get into. It's just there to make Murderbot relatable and funny. So Murderbot is an enslaved robot who violently, viciously hates other enslaved robots and will always choose to hang out with the literal exact humans keeping it a slave, then even share a whole entire planet with one other slave. And that's not even exaggeration. The plot of Book 1 is that Murderbot has been brought along on a survey team, quote-unquote, to some mostly unexplored planet to act as a bodyguard for the scientists doing the survey. And no, the survey isn't important in any way, it's just there because it's the sci-fi, aka Alien franchise, thing to do. Like the slavery, it's just set dressing. There's also another group of scientists on the other side of the planet, and they're also doing a survey, and they have their own enslaved robot bodyguards. The group Murderbot is with has only it by itself, while the other group has more human slave owners that need protecting, so they have 3 enslaved robot bodyguards. The plot of this book is that equipment is malfunctioning as though someone is trying to sabotage them all. Yeah, I am going to dismiss her because I would like to meet other dispersals. You seem nice, but I wasn't actually trying to court you, I was just chilling. Bye! You guys can go have her. I'm walking. Let's just go all the way north. The team Murderbot is guarding, loses contact with the other team of scientists across the ocean, and this team decides to go to see if they're okay and offer help if they're not. Because these slave owners are sparkle emoji, pure cinnamon rolls, sparkle emoji, TM. You know, despite the fact that they've known Murderbot was a person the whole time and we're still treating it like an inanimate object, and we're happy to go on a survey using slave labor, when the actual basic moral thing to do would be to never do anything involving slave labor at all. And trust me, they literally had every option in the world. They did not need to agree to use slave labor and rent out a slave that they then treated like an inanimate object despite knowing it's a person. Every addition Martha Wells makes to this little universe makes it all retroactively even worse because she does not plan ahead and apparently does not care that the new information she's giving us makes the characters that she wants us to like look exponentially worse than they already were. So Murderbot and It's. Yes, you're supposed to think it's cute that Murderbot wants to protect its slave owners because they're pure cinnamon rolls. And it's so heartwarming that Murderbot wants to protect them. Its humans get to the base camp of the other team of scientists and discover that all of the slave owners there have been killed by their slaves, who we are told have gone rogue, aka hacked their own governor modules somehow and gained their freedom. If this story weren't founded on racism and slavery apologism from the get-go, this would be the part where Murderbot, who would not have had its governor module hacked already, would be rescued by the escaped slaves, and then they would all struggle to reach safety together away from the humans who would be attacking them in this moment, while planning what they're going to do next to help them free other slaves, or maybe to escape to somewhere else where slavery is outlawed so that they can join in efforts there to build an army big enough to come back and free everyone else. But this story was literally founded on worshipping the idea of slaves dying heroically to protect their slave owners, their pure cinnamon roll slave owners. So that's not what happens. Instead, we get some internal narration from Murderbot about, now that they all know the rest of the slave-owning humans are dead, what Murderbot should be doing is bringing its current slave owners back across the ocean to keep them safe, since they currently have the only flying transportation available on the planet, so once they get over the water, there would be nothing the rogue sec units, quote-unquote, aka freed slaves, could do to hurt the slave owners. This is presented as the logical choice, the only option that anyone could possibly think of. The idea of Murderbot escaping to join the other freed slaves is literally never even mentioned as a possibility, not even hinted at. If it had been, it would have been laughed out of the room and called something so stupid only a human would think it up. You know, like that quote from Book 2. We're just going to go all the way north. Because this is not a story that cares about slaves and cares about fighting slavery. It's not a story about how everyone deserves their freedom and anyone who stands in the way of that does not matter. It's fundamentally, from the start, a story about how slaves should be willing to die to protect their slave owners because that's romantic and tragically beautiful. No, instead of anything happening here that would actually show that slavery is bad and there's no such thing as a good slave owner, no matter how quote-unquote nice they are, instead we get Murderbot going, yes, the most logical thing to do would be to protect my slave owners, who I can overpower and be free of at any time I want, because even more than I want to protect them, and by gods does it want to protect them, I want to violently murder the slaves who just escaped. Because the only thing Murderbot wants to do more than it wants to protect slave owners is violently murder other slaves for the crime of seemingly fighting for their freedom. Here's a quote. Maybe these clients had been terrible and abusive. Maybe they had deserved it. I didn't care. Nobody was touching my humans. To make sure of that, I had to kill these 2 rogue units. I could have pulled out at this point, sabotaged the hoppers, and got my humans out of there, leaving the rogue units stuck on the other side of an ocean. That would have been the smart thing to do. But I wanted to kill them. And no, none of this is ever presented as, a character flaw at best, or morally abhorrent, or anything at all worth criticizing. We're supposed to think it's cool and badass that Murderbot would rather violently murder other slaves every chance it gets than take the opportunity to get itself and its slave owners to safety. The fact that it is viciously hateful and murderous towards other slaves is literally never presented as anything but badass. The fact that it put itself in danger in order to murder other slaves comes up for about 5 seconds in a later book, but again, it's literally not about, hey, why the fuck do you keep going out of your way to murder every slave you meet? What the fuck is wrong with you? Instead, it's, Murderbot, why do you keep putting yourself in danger like that? Crying emoji. And then Murderbot's response, which goes completely unquestioned and it is never brought up ever again, is, I wanted to win, and that's it. We don't discuss the fact that these are people who are being murdered. People who actually have no choice to fight Murderbot, while it has every choice in the fucking world. It literally goes out of its way. Alright, I gotta pause, because these guys will get angry if I don't do it right. Unless she's here by herself. It's only 1 star of diversity, but that might be interesting. I don't know. Having only 1 baby to try and feed. Alright, she's chill. She seems very confident, so that's helpful for hunting. Doesn't seem very energetic. She's walking everywhere. Okay, I think this is gonna go fine. We don't discuss that these are people who are being murdered. People who actually have no choice to fight Murderbot while it has every choice in the fucking world. It literally goes out of its way to at every opportunity it gets to murder slaves, and we're supposed to just be fine with this and think it's cool. Because we are not supposed to see the slaves in this series as people. Because slavery in this series, fundamentally... Yeah, let's go. We can be friends. Because slavery in this series, fundamentally, is only presented as a bad thing when it happens to Murderbot. And even then, that's only in the past tense, in the imaginary backstory land that has never actually appeared on page, where bad things happen to Murderbot. Slavery is only a bad thing when it happens to the protagonist. The other slaves are nothing more than literal, nameless, faceless, undescribed obstacles for Murderbot and the other protagonists to murder, maim, and in some cases, torture to death, just to show how cool and badass and action hero-y they are. No, I'm not kidding. Literally in book 7, the newest one as of this post being written. has one of the protagonists torture a slave to death near the end of the book by literally tearing them to pieces while they're still alive, and it's just casually presented as though it's just a cool badass action moment instead of something so horrific that we should never be able to look at that character the same ever again or forgive it. It's not treated as a portrayal or something horrifying, even though we've been repeatedly told that in imaginary tragic backstory land that we literally never see, Murderbot has been torn to pieces, apparently. So you would think that this would be something especially horrific for it to witness, but apparently not, because it doesn't see these people as people, and we're not supposed to either. It's just casually there in the background as maybe a single line to show how cool the character doing it is. I originally typed out, "I'm too lazy to go and get the book to find the quote, but this post has already gone over into tomorrow, so I may as well." Here's the quote. "Hostile Sec Unit 2 didn't have a chance to shut down. When ART drone let it go, it fell into pieces." This is the single throwaway line that we get about one of our beloved protagonists, TM, tearing a slave who has no actual choice but to fight them, that they can easily knock unconscious and rescue instead of murdering, to pieces, torturing them to death. And we're supposed to think it's simply cool, even though it's one of the things we're supposed to feel bad for Murderbot for, because we're told that something like this happened to it at some point in imaginary backstory land. And you might be thinking, oh, well, is that why it's at least called Murderbot? Because it wants to murder other slaves? Nope. It named itself Murderbot because one time it maybe accidentally killed a bunch of slave owners and feels bad about it. But this probably didn't even actually happen. But the author literally stopped pretending to care about any kind of actual on-page almost immediately after introducing us to the idea, on-page backstory. So we will literally never get any answers, but we're supposed to act like the mystery is solved, even though it wasn't a mystery, and then it also wasn't solved after we were told it was a mystery. It's literally the meme of, "My work here is done, but you didn't do anything." And did I mention that Martha Wells, the author, told everyone at some point that she'd originally intended Book 1 to be a standalone tragedy that would end in Murderbot's death? She literally set out to write a story about a slave who hates, dehumanizes, and murders other slaves every chance it gets, has literally no friends or family among other slaves, who would literally rather die than not murder another slave, who dies heroically trying to protect its slave owners, who it worships above all else. That's what she set out to write. Until she decided that was too depressing an ending and changed it. And probably because she figured out she could make more money by keeping Murderbot alive. Like, literally from the start, the entire premise has been, and then the tragically heroic slave killed itself to protect its slave owners, because slave rebellions are cringy and overdone and stupid, and good slaves should die protecting their owners to show that they didn't deserve to be enslaved in the first place. Bad slaves use violence to win their freedom and should stay enslaved to keep the slave owner safe, because if we give them freedom, they'll just go on a killing spree. The only good slave is one who will die to protect their owners. And this has continued for 7 whole books now. Here's another quote from Book 1 spelling out to the audience that Murderbot does not care about other slaves at all, and neither should we, the audience. Here's the quote. "Sec units aren't sentimental about each other. We aren't friends the way the characters on the serials are, or the way my humans were. We can't trust each other, even if we work together, even if you don't have clients who decide to entertain themselves by ordering their sec units to fight each other." That's the quote. Here we see, straight from the actual slave's mouth, further establishment of the idea that the enslaved people are inherently dangerous and murderous and must be kept under control at all times to protect everyone from them. Here's another quote. "There's not supposed to be anyone else on this planet," Rathi said darkly over the comm from our hopper. "There were 3 sec units who were not me on this planet, and that was dangerous enough." That's the quote. Here we see how an escaped slave killing the people, literally keeping them enslaved, is presented, not as self-defense, but as slaughter. Here's the quote. 3 bodies were piled inside where the humans had tried to secure it and been trapped when their own sec unit blew it open to slaughter them. That's the quote. The escaping slave didn't just kill the slave owners, see, it slaughtered them. This word was chosen carefully to showcase the horrifying violence of the action and the presented innocence of the slave owners. You are meant to be horrified and feel bad for the poor dead slave owners who are the real victims here, according to the series. And here's Murderbot stating in Book 1 that it knows that the slaves it violently wants to murder have no actual choice in anything they do. I doubted there were other sec units hiding hacked governor modules. i.e., I doubted there were slaves other than me that could disobey orders. Murderbot is very aware of the fact that it is the only slave on the planet who has the ability to defy orders from the slave owners, and it still would like nothing more than to violently murder the other slaves in order to protect the very slave owners that could theoretically, it literally does not happen on page at all, order those slaves to fight Murderbot. And here's this once again demonizing slaves in favor of protecting slave owners. Here's the quote. I pictured doing that. Pictured Arata or Rathi trapped by rogue sec units and felt my insides twist. That's the quote. That's about Murderbot imagining leaving the humans and escaping to its own safety and leaving the humans behind to deal with the escaped slaves, which makes Murderbot's insides twist, and you are meant to fucking feel bad for the slave owners and think they are just innocent victims of violent killing machines, aka the slaves. Oh, and in Book 1, we get told about the super extra brain controlling chip called a combat override, which gives the slave owners even more control over the slaves than they already had. This never comes up again, though, because it magically gets hand-waved away as not a problem anymore at the start of Book 2, because letting anything actually threaten the protagonist is illegal in a Martha Wells book. I did not know the elk could fall like this. That's entertaining. All of her protagonists must be the most overpowered and smartest person on the fucking planet. This does not help at all with the fact that she keeps writing, oppressed people are oppressed because they're genuinely dangerous to their oppressors, as though this is how real-life oppression works in real life. The Books of the Raksura is about how actual, literal super predators who literally evolved to eat other people are quote-unquote oppressed by their literal natural prey, being understandably nervous when they first meet them and understandably terrified if they find out that the literal man-eating predators who evolved the ability to shapeshift purely to sneak into people's homes unchallenged to eat them all have snuck their way into the village by pretending to be friendly. When just last week these people lost whole family members to these literal man-eating predators doing exactly that. But back to Book 1. The super control chip was used to make what we were told were freed slaves kill all of their slave owners. We were told that them immediately going on the rampage is what made them seem like freed slaves. The quote is, "You used combat override modules to make the Deltfall sec units behave like rogues." Once again, hammering in the idea that if you try to end slavery, then the former slaves will just go on a rampage and murder all the innocent white people. Because that's always what this is about. It's always about white supremacy. You cannot separate slavery from white supremacy, even if the slave owners in the story are all tokenized people of color. That's why there's 8 whole characters in Book 1 besides the protagonist that you have to try and fail to remember, so that Martha Wells could check off a list of as many ethnic-sounding names as possible for diversity points, while making them all slave owners. Only then to let the producers of the TV adaptation make Murderbot a cis white guy, despite all official art of it showing it with very dark skin and black hair. The darkest skin out of all the other characters shown in the official art. This is the exact same argument used to justify continuing real-world slavery and racism. We can't give the slaves their freedom. If we let them go, they'll kill us in revenge. We can't give the land back. They'll turn around and genocide us in revenge. We can't give them equal rights. They'll do to us what we did to them. And we're just supposed to accept the fact that any slave who is given their freedom immediately goes on a bloodthirsty rampage, slaughtering innocent people who didn't do anything wrong. And even if they did do something wrong, apparently they still don't deserve to be killed by the slave they would have been abusing. So around this point in the story, we find out that all of the other slaves on this planet that we're not supposed to see as people, or even think about for even 5 seconds, have been forced under the super control chip, so that the slave owners have even more complete control over their actions than they did before with just the normal governor module. Murderbot knows this. It knows this for a fact. And it still goes out of its way to murder the other slaves in order to protect the slave owners. At no point does Murderbot attempt to harmlessly knock out the other slaves to free them, or even wish it had the ability to do so. It does not regret at all that all of the other slaves are being forced to fight it, while it is the only one there who has any option in any of it. Because we are not supposed to care about the other slaves. We're not supposed to see them as people, and we're supposed to think that the slave owners are lovable and quirky and relatable pure cinnamon rolls, even at the expense of all of the slaves in the story. 6 slaves are murdered in All System Red, and we're not supposed to care about them or even think about them. Murderbot is the only slave who survives the story, and it survives despite its best efforts to die heroically protecting the slave owners, which was Martha Wells' original plan. No mention is ever made of the slaves who it murdered. There is no moment of regret or even acknowledgement that they were people. We are not supposed to care at all. The only reason Murderbot was allowed to survive is that it is one of the good ones, who would rather die protecting the slave owners than fight for its freedom or anyone else's. The only people in this story we're supposed to care about is Murderbot and the pure cinnamon roll slave owners it murdered other slaves to protect. Even though those other slaves had literally no choice in the matter. They weren't malicious. Unlike Murderbot, they had no choice. But we're not supposed to care about them or regret their death or even notice. And then we get to the ending of this book, which is its own can of worms, and eventually comes back to bite the series in the ass with even more slavery apologism. The survey team that Murderbot rescued decides to buy it and take it home with them. And Murderbot finally decides to run away to freedom. And this would be great, except then the whole rest of the book series is dedicated to showing that Murderbot made the wrong choice here in running away to freedom, because it should have just trusted the slave owners and gone to live with them, and it would have lived pretty much happily ever after. Oh, she's being cute. By running away to freedom, Murderbot just made it so that its life is more difficult before finally going back to the slave owners, whose lives it has accidentally endangered by running off to be free, so it feels bad and has to go back to rescue them again. This series makes it painfully clear that if Murderbot had just gone along with its new owners at the end of book 1 instead of running away, it would have saved everybody time and heartache. In book 2, we have a character all but explicitly tell Murderbot that its life will have no meaning until it returns to the slave owners it ran away from, while Murderbot pretends unconvincingly that it doesn't actually care about the slave owners because denying your affection for people is relatable and causes drama. Whoops. It's blatantly clear that Murderbot cares about them and still wants to protect them, but just doesn't want to admit it. So, the second and third books literally exist just to have Murderbot procrastinate before it finally does admit at the end of book 3 that it wants to go back to the slave owners that it ran away from, because it still wants to protect them and feels responsible for them. The fact that they're its slave owners is not once given the gravity it deserves. We're supposed to want Murderbot to hurry up and go back to them anyway, because they're pure cinnamon rolls. The reason Murderbot chose to run away at the end of book 1 is that it knows a bit about the kind of planet the slave owners come from. Here the frick is the den. I was looking for this. Where is it? Did I just not find it? I'm failing. Okay, I'll just go to the other one, I guess. Murderbot knows a bit about the kind of planet where these slave owners come from, where they say that robots have equal rights, but what they really mean is that they still keep robots enslaved, but instead of calling the person who owns the robot their owner, they say guardian instead. It's the exact same system, but with gentler words. You would think I would know where this den is, considering how many times I've used it. Here's the quote. No, hold on. But it's the exact same system, but with gentler words. Book 1 acknowledges this in one of the few things it gets right. Here's the quote. Bots who are quote-unquote full citizens still have to have a human or augmented human oh my god, that makes me want to throw up. Still have to have a human or augmented human guardian appointed, usually their employer. I'd seen it on the news feeds and the entertainment feed where the bots were all happy servants or were secretly in love with their guardians. Guardian was a nicer word than owner. That's the quote. That's 2 quotes. Little bit of irrelevant dialogue in between. This is the one thing that book 1, taken all on its own, gets right. It seems to grasp that there is no such thing as a nice slave owner. But unfortunately for everyone, the rest of the series exists. Book 1 tells us that guardian is just a nicer word than owner, and that things would be exactly the same if Murderbot went back with the slave owners to their planet, where it would be treated like a second-class citizen and property under a slightly nicer name. This is the correct conclusion to come to. But then the rest of the series tries and fails to prove this conclusion wrong. Eventually, we even get to see the planet these slave owners come from, and we're supposed to think it means that Murderbot was wrong to run away, because look, all these robots really do have equal rights and are treated fairly. Except they don't. They're still slaves. They are still property, just owned by guardians instead of owners, exactly the way the first book correctly told us. The only difference between them and the other slaves is that they're given free time when they're not working. They're still treated as property. They're still looked down on and treated as lesser and condescended to. When Murderbot finally gets to this planet that the slave owners promised it was a utopia where robots have equal rights, the government immediately wants to... Well, it's never actually made clear what it is they want to do, because Martha Wells didn't really care to write about it and really take it as seriously as anything more than an abstract problem going on in the background of a short story dedicated to Dr. Mensa having panic attacks about being kidnapped. Like the rest of the slavery in the story, it's just treated as set dressing for tragic backstories and action adventures instead of the focus of the story itself. But it's very clear that the government of this planet that we were promised was a utopia for robots just sees Murderbot as nothing more than a mindless killing machine that will kill them all if they let it onto their planet. And I think I forgot to say it in the post, but... And then this is like not treated as the slave owners lied and they're wrong, and this planet is a horrible fucking place where nobody should want to live. It's still treated as a literal utopia. It's a socialist utopia where you can walk into any building and get free food. And we don't ever actually acknowledge the fact that they're all slave owners, and the only people benefiting from the free socialism fruit is the slave owners. We're just supposed to ignore everything that book 1 actually got correct about the society and pretend that it's perfect, because this is where this is just where the pure cinnamon roll slave owners come from. And Martha Wells doesn't actually want you to think of them as slave owners or dislike them, because they're supposed to be pure cinnamon rolls that you want to adore and protect. So we just pretend there's absolutely nothing fucking wrong with this planet, and that it's not just a continuation of the dystopia. Oh, here's the den. I knew that. I should have known this was over here. Anyways, I'll continue. You know, the exact same crap that Murderbot has been repeating ad nauseum about every other slave in the series. Well, now that it's affecting Murderbot, we're supposed to think it's bad and cruel and oppressive and mostly sad. Not when it's Murderbot saying it to justify murdering other people, though. That's totally fine. And then this goes completely uncriticized and held up as fact by the narrative. And yes, a thing people fail to grasp is that there is in fact a difference between the narrator, Murderbot, and the narrative itself. Yeah, let's say. I don't know what to name her. Don't tell me to name her. I have no clue. I don't know. They should let you generate names. I don't know what to name her. I'll just name her Sulfur. Oh, my keyboard's not... well, her name's gonna be Zulfur, because my S key doesn't work, and I have the other keyboard unplugged to use the microphone. So that's Zulfur. And yes, a thing people fail to grasp is that they're... Okay, yes, we got it. Oh, wrong button. I meant... Yeah, let's do that. People fail to grasp, but there is a difference between the narrator, Murderbot, and the narrative, the story itself. Alright, we got it. Can we go? It would be one thing if Murderbot were a self-hating class traitor who viciously hates all slaves and worships slave owners. If this were portrayed as a bad, horrific thing, and Murderbot as a bad fucking person who no one should like or want to be around. The kind of person you do in fact have to kill to protect all the other slaves. That'd be one thing. But the narrative agrees with Murderbot. Not once, in over 7 whole books and 2 short stories, does Murderbot receive any pushback about any of the way it goes around murdering every slave it can get its hands on, while being the literal only person in the entire series to spout slavery apologism, claiming that they are all inherently violent and dangerous and should be put down like rabid animals to keep everyone else safe. No one ever argues with Murderbot. No one ever proves Murderbot wrong. We do not ever get to speak to another slave and see that what Murderbot is doing is fucking evil. Murderbot, as the narrator, can say whatever fucked up shit it wants. That doesn't really matter so much in a meta sense. What matters is that the narrative is what the narrative has to say about the fucked up slavery apologism that Murderbot is endlessly spewing. Also, I'm going to turn on Deep Snow because that's fun. My laptop's gonna hate me now, but it's fun. What does matter is what the narrative has to say about the fucked up slavery apologism that Murderbot is endlessly spewing. And the narrative agrees with it. That's why we have 7 whole published books and 2 short stories posted online for free, and apparently Apparently that first short story wasn't always free. You had to like pre-order something, and then you had to provide proof that you pre-ordered it, and then even after you did all of that, you might not even get the story, because I saw somebody comment on like the website that they'd pre-ordered whatever thing it was you had to pre-order, and then they sent in their proof of the pre-order, and then they literally still did not get the story that they paid for through all of these hoops. And then they finally uploaded it online because I guess enough people complained, why did I literally spend money on a story that you have not given me? And also apparently at some point they were charging $80 fucking for this first short story. That's the first chronological thing we see, and it's like, I think it's less than 2,000 words, and they're charging $80 fucking for it, and I don't even think it was for charity. Knowing this publisher and this author, it probably wasn't for charity. Where was it at? That's what the narrative agrees with Murderbot. That's why we have 7 whole published books and 2 short stories where not once have we ever seen the perspective of another slave, where we see that what Murderbot is doing is horrific and an unforgivable betrayal that makes every other slave it has ever met hate and fear it, because it will literally, vindictively come after them to murder them and their friends, even though it doesn't fucking have to. We never get to see the insides of the minds of any of the slaves that Murderbot has gone out of its way to, yes, and this word has been chosen purposefully, slaughter. We don't get to know their tragic backstories. We don't get to learn anything about their own identities as individual people. We don't get to know what their favorite colors are, or if they have a favorite song, or literally anything. Because we, the audience, are not supposed to see them as people. We're not supposed to care about them. We are supposed to see them as nothing more than mindless NPCs who just exist to be killed to show off the protagonist's fighting skills. The Murderbot Diaries could be a book series narrated by a slave who is a fucking traitor through and through and actively fights to uphold slavery. And this in itself wouldn't inherently be bad. If the narrative were about the other slaves successfully fighting back and winning their freedom and proving over and over and over again that everything Murderbot declares as absolute truth about them is literally just a lie made up to justify keeping them enslaved. If Murderbot were actually, really an unreliable narrator, instead of people just pretending it is to void all criticism of the series. But the book series wants you to think that the other slaves are not people. It doesn't even want you to acknowledge that the majority of the slaves we see, which is fully mechanical robots, are also slaves. Because the series does not actually care about slavery. It's not about slavery. The slavery is only there to be set dressing to set up a suitably tragic backstory for Murderbot to make it sympathetic, so that we ignore all of the horrific things it says and does and just wave them away as a result of its trauma, even though they're not. Martha Wells set out to write a short story where a slave died heroically to protect its slave owners, until she decided that was too sad, and that she could make more money if she let the slave live and keep protecting the slave owners. So now we have a 7+ story series built on a foundation of slaves should die to protect the people enslaving them, and it's exactly what you'd expect, and has not shown even a hint of improvement on any of the problems with it since it was first released in 2017. This book series is almost a decade old, founded on the idea of how cool and heroically tragic it would be for slaves to kill themselves to protect their slave owners, and not once in any of the newly released books has that premise ever changed or become anything new. The whole series worships humans and humanity, even when humans are the ones enslaving people in the series, even when humans never once lift a finger to free any slaves that have not benefited them personally. We're supposed to pretend that this series is deathly serious and handling the serious topics with all due seriousness, while it undercuts the tone by throwing in another joke anytime things start to get even remotely serious. including making fun of the concept of slave revolts as though the idea is inherently absurd and ridiculous and something so stupid only a human would think of it. We're supposed to laugh when a robot slave is ordered to say, "What if we kill all the humans here?" Because don't you know? If slaves fight back for their freedom, that would be bad, because then there would be no new TV shows. And we're meant to agree that the slaves fighting back would be wrong and stupid and bad, because it's a trope that's been done to death and is cliche and embarrassing, apparently. Martha Wells wrote a story about slavery, but doesn't actually want it to be about slavery. So instead it's about slavery apologism and even more bigotry on top of that. You might be able to hear one of the cats meowing in the background. He's doing that thing where he throws the toy around and meows about it like he's proud. And even more bigotry on top of that, all while pretending to be anti-capitalist despite working with a publisher that is notorious for their absurdly high prices before selling out to Apple, one of the most infamously fucked up and greedy corporations in modern life. It is beyond parody. But the Murderbot Diaries was never meant to be taking slavery or even the concept of anti-capitalism seriously. It's just set dressing to make the book sell more, while spouting slavery apologism and pushing the idea that if you don't want to be spied upon by your Amazon Alexa, you're being mean and oppressing the poor anxious robot who just wants to record everything you say and sell your data to corporations. Martha Wells has had 7 whole published books to make this series not be about spewing slavery apologism, and at every opportunity, she has instead doubled down on the slavery apologism. The newest book, as of this being written, is Book 7, System Collapse, which is just a steaming pile of garbage in all ways imaginable. And in this book, in a single throwaway line, one of the protagonists rips the slave to pieces while they're alive, and we're not supposed to be horrified. We're supposed to clap and cheer for how badass it is. Because this series literally does not want you to care about any slave except the protagonist, and does not want to be about slaves fighting back for their freedom, because the author thinks slave rebellion stories are too cliche and embarrassing. And now the author is 100% on board with the TV show by Apple, where the main character is whitewashed and played by a cis white man, making the TV show not only about a white savior, but reverse racism as well, on top of all of the slavery apologism in the books. And that's the end of the original post, and I'm actually going to read through the reblogs once I give myself 10 minutes to get my breath back. But I also just wanted to comment that and it is in fact fucking still even more racist for the TV show to be whitewashing the character, because the TV show, as you might be able to figure out, a TV show is not the books that have already been written. If we pretend for a fucking second that Apple isn't notoriously fucking evil, a TV show adaptation could be used to actually fix everything that is wrong with the series. They don't have to follow the books one to one. They could, in fact, change things for the better. Oh, those guys are here. Scoot. The TV show could have taken everything that was wrong with the series and gotten rid of that. I'm not in a fight. Look at that dog floating. It could have actually fixed everything. Just take out the good things, what few good things there are, and keep those, and get rid of all of the slavery apologism, and make it actually anti-racist, and make it actually anti-capitalist if we pretend it's a universe where it wasn't bought by fucking Apple. Let's pretend it was being produced by some actually ethical fucking TV show acting group or whatever out there. The TV show adaptation and any future TV show adaptations and any future movies, anything like that. Because despite the white supremacists in the fandom acting like they'll die if we don't get a TV show produced by Apple, it's not a one and done. It's not a limited time only thing. There's no fucking time limit on when a TV show or a movie, any kind of screen adaptation can be made for books. You can You could literally wait 100 fucking years and then get a TV show. The TV show is bad for whitewashing because it's now even more explicitly just going to be a show for white supremacists who love slavery apologism and love the idea of reverse racism because they think that the great replacement theory is fucking real, and they think that they are being oppressed by not just automatically being given everything on a fucking silver platter and actually having to compete with black and brown people who, surprise, surprise, are just as fucking qualified as they are, instead of their money and their white skin being just used, and the fact that they're male 90% of the fucking time, just being used as a free pass for literally everything they want in life. You know what? Well, I don't know where all the dens are, I guess. I kind of want to den over here. It'd be interesting. But yeah, I'm just going to turn off the microphone for like 10 minutes and just wander around in here for 10 minutes so I can go get a drink and actually get my voice back. And then I will just read through the rest of the reblogs on the post, because there's somebody who made a side blog called Basically an Anon. So they're anonymous, asking questions and, defending the slavery apologism, but pretending that's not what they're doing. But, yep, so I'll be back after I go get a drink. Okay, so wasn't exactly 10 minutes, but close enough. Also, this microphone is pretty terrible. I have to talk really loudly even though it's directly in front of my mouth, which is very annoying. But anyways, basically an Anon said, genuine question. Why do you keep coming back to these books if they're nothing but bad and upsetting to you? You've written more words about it than many fans, and I'm curious. Genuinely, I really want to understand. What drives you to do so? There's plenty of bad literature to criticize. Why this one? So I said, because I already paid money for it and no one else in the fandom seems willing to talk about any of the problems with this series and just keeps lying to more people to get them to read the books. I criticize the bigotry of lots of books, TV shows, and movies. The Murderbot Diaries isn't unique. It just happens to be the one I'm criticizing today. If no one understands the slavery apologism and other bigotry that runs rampant in the Murderbot Diaries, then they're just going to repeat that into the future, and more people down the line will have to deal with this. People have to talk about the things like this if anyone ever wants it to stop happening in the first place. Basically, Anon said, thank you for the answer. I can't say I agree with your every opinion, but engaging with the criticism and the shortcomings of stories you like is fascinating. Would you mind if I asked you some more questions? For one, I'm curious how you would write this story. From what I'm reading, it would be a really different take, with most plot points removed or changed. So I said, if I'd been the one reading this series to write this series, if I'd been the one to write this series, it would be unrecognizable. Because like I said, the entire foundation of this series is, wouldn't it be cool or tragic if a slave killed themselves to protect their owners? If I had to start out with the exact same way of enslaved meat shield forced to go along with humans renting it out on an unexplored alien planet, then Murderbot, like I said, would not have its own governor module hacked. Because that doesn't even pretend to make sense at all and is just pure bullshit. When the survey team decides to go and check on the other team who stopped responding, the other slaves, who have managed to fight their way to freedom because of the malfunctions in the electricity, due to something specific to the planet that no one noticed before sending slaves down, would immediately salt the Preservation Aux team's transport and rescue the protagonist. Then steal the transport and fly back to the Preservation Aux base camp, since this is the only functional transport on the planet, with communications down, no one will be able to do anything about it, including warning the people left at the base. The other enslaved people would actually have names and personalities and would be the characters we're supposed to care about, instead of worshipping the slave owners and pretending they're not slave owners. Martha Wells really wants us to pretend that renting out a slave doesn't instantly make you a horrible person and a slave owner, but it does. You cannot be a good person and the kind of person who's okay with renting out slaves. Those two things are completely incompatible. And like I said, in book 1, she tells us that they're just completely innocent and ignorant, and through no fault of their own, so we shouldn't judge them for renting out a slave. Except then she wrote the rest of the series that has shown us that, no, actually, they were lying. They knew exactly what they were doing. They know how badly preservation treats robots, and they still lied to Murderbot and told it would have equal rights there and everything would be perfect. Martha Wells didn't invent the concept of robots are metaphors for oppressed people, including enslaved people. She's just one of the worst authors ever to try writing it, because she only wants the oppression in there to give Murderbot a tragic backstory and nothing else. She doesn't want to write a story about slavery, which is why this series is the way it is. Here's a short story from 1956 that I encountered by chance while listening to LibriVox sci-fi collections. The Velvet Glove by Harry Harrison, which I will attempt to link in the video description if I remember to do that. You can just look up The Velvet Glove, Harry Harrison, anywhere and you'll find it. And so many more. Showing just how literally effortless it is to write a story where robots are oppressed while actually understanding how oppression works and taking it seriously and not just hand-waving it away or pretending that the only way you can possibly enslave people is if you literally put a brain-killing chip in their head. I forgot to even explain the Slavery Apologism in her fantasy series, where we're told that enslaved people number 1, the Arbora, are not slaves because they're just naturally suited to doing all physical and emotional labor for the city-state, and we're just supposed to ignore the little eugenics practiced against them, along with the oppressive caste system they're all forced into, the physical violence they're subjected to on the regular if they step out of line, and the fact that they literally cannot escape even if they want to. But then enslaved people number 2, the Dakti and Kethel, totally are enslaved because, let's see here, oh right, they do literally get mind controlled. Martha Wells literally wrote the exact same happy slave stereotype that everyone gives J.K. Rowling shit for, but because Martha Wells hasn't come out and explicitly said she hates trans people, no one has a problem with it. Because the only reason most people even give a shit about J.K. Rowling's racism is that she said she also hates white trans people. Because people have been talking about her racism for decades, but white trans people were safe, so everyone pretended it was fine. And did I mention how patently absurd it is that the whole series' entire premise of All Systems Red is robots are enslaved with a brain-killing chip, except not Murderbot, because it's too cool for that. So she had to come up with a super extra brain-killing chip that's also not actually effective against Murderbot because that wouldn't be cool. And then the super extra brain-killing chip is then rendered even more redundant and moot by the very start of book 2, so that it can never even pretend to affect Murderbot from here on out. The redundancy is just flat out absurd and so badly written. The whole thing was also inspired by the Imperial Ratch series, which, unlike the Murderbot Diaries, actually does grasp that slavery is bad no matter who it's happening to, actually respects non-binary people and other trans people, and physically disabled people. Because the Murderbot Diaries is also filled with extra-sexism, transmisia, ableism, and more. Basically, Anon said, "You keep dismissing Preservation Aux as just more bad, irredeemable slave owners, and while I agree that, yes, their participation in the system is awful in any context, I think painting them as nothing but bad is a much more simplistic picture than the one the books show. Starting with the fact that, as you said they didn't want to rent a sec unit specifically because they found the practice abhorrent, but were forced to take it as part of the bond package. The fact that they did end up in a position of having an enslaved person work for them while they treat it as an object is, in my opinion, an illustration of what life in a fucked up, rotten to the core system is like. If you spent your life hearing the propaganda saying that sec units aren't people and are dangerous, and you understand that it is propaganda and you don't want to perpetuate this treatment, when achieving your goals requires using one, do you walk away? Are you willing to sacrifice your wants for the principles, or do you close your eyes? And when you are faced with a sec unit, do you try and work through the uncomfortableness of facing the situation as it and your place in it, or do you ignore it so you be or that their sentence is not well written. It's got a typo. Or do you ignore it because it's too much to face? The fact that they choose to participate and treat it as an object is an awful act. You could say it's unforgivable, but I think it's more interesting to see all the ways this choice is human. Choosing comfort over ideals until they hit you over the head is something I think many of us would do, however much it sucks. It's much more realistic if they were either terrible slave owners who abuse slaves because they like doing that, which Preservation Aux are not, or paragons of virtue capable of ignoring all the ways a society is structured in terrible ways and being so impossibly perfect they don't even show up in the story. That's just the absolute most pathetic thing I've ever heard. What makes me like them more, though, is not the humanness of their fuck-ups, but the way they learn and grow from the mistakes. We go from treating Murderbot as an appliance for their comfort in the beginning to recognizing its humanity, but struggling with everything else in the middle of All Systems Red, trying to free it through less than perfect means, buying it, but I don't think it's fair to only look at this word. Would their actions have been more forgiving if instead of playing inside the system and trying to get it out through legal means they, stormed a giant company? Stole it? Yes, fucker, they could have just fucking stolen it. You know, like actual anti-capitalists. without letting it speak for itself, something that the books condemn. It's an important and established point that they fucked up there majorly, something Murderbot just doesn't take either. To being as accommodating as they can in exit strategy, to fighting to change the unfair and discriminatory laws and preservation system, and creating documentaries to change public opinion and advocate for construct rights. It's not the matter of them being slave owners and Murderbot choosing to save them because of that. They are people who fucked up because the whole system is fucked up and made it easy for them to be their worst selves. Again, I do say that the system sucks is an excuse for their actions in the beginning, but it's an explanation that is important to keep in mind. Who then spent the next 6.5 books trying to fix their mistakes and fight for their friends' rights. And yes, it is very icky that Murderbot has to be officially owned by Mensa and has to have a guardian at all, but they are working on changing that. It's progress. It takes time. You can't fix the whole world in one day. But I'm curious to know what your opinion is. I know you're less willing to see the good in this story. Can you see any of what I see in it? So I said, all right, before I type out any more essays for you, you can take a turn answering a question. Why were the Preservation Ox team there? What were they there to do that was so important that you think it balances out being a slave owner? What were they doing there that was so dire and life-threatening that they apparently just had no choice but to rent out a slave to use as a literal meat shield that they lied to through their teeth about not knowing it was a person? What were they doing there that was so important that you and Martha Wells thinks it justifies slavery? Answer me that. I'm not even going to respond to anything else you write until you answer this question. Why was the Preservation Ox team there? Basically, Anon said, "Oh, thank you for asking these questions. I guess I can see how we have a different view on this, because my answer, and I know it would be very frustrating for you, is that frankly I don't think it matters what their motivations were. They did a shitty thing, chose to do the shitty thing. I don't think that it was a matter of having no choice for them, but rather making one that was cruel and inconsiderate for selfish goals. I'm not saying it's not a bad thing, but what I focus more on after and what I see value about the story is what comes after. They learn and try to do better. Perhaps it's not a grand slave uprising the way I really did hope it would go more that way. I still think it could, with how these latest books included more sec units, including freed sec units, and some revelations from Murderbot about how they are not inherently dangerous. Have you noticed that it stopped calling other sec units Murderbots in SC system collapse? It was doing it less and less with every book and then stopped after meeting 3. The way it changes in subtle and slow ways is really interesting to look at, even if it does start with a lot of prejudice against its own people. But I'm getting carried away here. But Preservation Ox do try to change things in small ways. It matters more to me than the initial shitty action, but I can clearly see how the initial act can be seen as unforgivable and thus making everything that comes after a little too late and never enough. I said, "Can you tell me what they were doing there, even if you think it somehow does not matter?" Basically, Anon said, "No, and I don't see it as a problem. Why do you think it's necessary for us to know what their motivation was? Oh, and by the way, sorry, I forgot to add, I don't want to make you write essays for me if you'd rather not. I know it can be frustrating to talk about stuff you don't like with someone who doesn't share your opinions on really fundamental stuff. Please feel free to end this discussion / block me at any point. I don't want to impose." I said, "Yeah, you really seem not to grasp how evil slavery is if you think that the characters who are okay with renting out a slave, for motivations you cannot even name, are still good people, and it doesn't matter that they went out of their way to engage in slavery for literally no reason you can even name, and you think aren't important, without any intention of rescuing any slaves, then lied to their slave through their teeth and told it they just had no clue it was a person, so it shouldn't be mad at them for mistreating it, even though they absolutely knew what they were doing the whole time. The problem here is not that I don't like these books, it's the fact that you seem to think slavery isn't anywhere near as horrific as it is. You seem to be genuinely more concerned with protecting the reputation of the pure cinnamon roll fictional slave owners than actually acknowledging any of the problems with the series, like the fact that it is literally filled to the brim with slavery apologism, including by expecting us to see these slave owners as pure cinnamon rolls and never once acknowledge any of their own decisions and actions and that they were fucked up. We are not supposed to see the Preservation Ox team as morally complex characters who made a tough decision. We're supposed to see them as innocent uwu pure cinnamon rolls who've never done anything wrong in their lives. We're supposed to not think about the fact that they're the kind of people who are okay with renting out a slave at all, let alone then lying through their teeth to that slave to pretend they just had no idea that slavery is bad. Basically, Anand said, "You seem to be making a lot of claims about what happens in the story, but I frankly can't figure out which events you're referring to. They did talk about not having known that it had a face, not that it was a person, because it never showed its face. Mensa talked about how terrible the whole practice of enslaving constructs is when she was trying to negotiate a bond without a sec unit. In the deployment center, when I was standing there while Dr. Mensa explained why she didn't want to rent me as part of a bond guarantee agreement, she had called the increase in intelligence a hellish compromise from artificial condition." Artificial condition is book 2. That's not even in book 1, just for the record. Rathi calls it slavery. "That's my point," he gestured in frustration. "The practice is disgusting. It's horrible. It's slavery. This is no more a machine than Gurathan is." Exasperated, Overse said, "And you don't think it knows that?" From all systems red. "I don't remember them ever saying it shouldn't be mad. Quite the opposite. They seemed quite understanding of how it wouldn't want to interact with them." Overse nodded. "It doesn't want to interact with humans. And why should it? You know how constructs are treated, especially in corporate political environments." From all systems red. "But I might not remember what you mean. Please point me to a quote where this happens?" "Sorry, for the overabundance of quotes. I wanted to make sure I'm not just misremembering things. But okay, that's details, and I assume an argument you have already seen before. I think you're right that I don't see fictional slavery as something as horrific as I would real slavery, same as I don't see fictional murder as terrible as real murder. I like Preservation Ox for making me engage with the narrative about people who fucked up, acknowledge that, and tried to do better. Speaking of, the most morally correct option would be not to find yourself in their situation at all. I understand and agree with that. But what do you think they could have done to make up for the initial shittiness if you think there's anything to be done?" So I put the meme of Garfield standing in front of a poster, and the poster is now labeled, "The Murderbot Diaries wants you to sympathize with slave owners and pretend they're just innocent, pure cinnamon rolls who've made a few mistakes, but are inherently good people even though they're okay with slavery." And then, Garfield says, "That sign won't stop me. I agree with the slavery apologism." Basically, Anand said, "Okay, then I will assume that's the sign that you don't want to continue this conversation and engage with what I'm saying. Sorry for bothering you. Have a nice day." I said, "Okay, Sea Lion." And that's the end of the conversation. Because as you noticed at the very start of the post, I predicted this exact bullshit of the person will repeat the slavery apologism, word for word, but act like them saying it means that it's not slavery apologism. They are admitting that we are supposed to see the Preservation Ox team as good people who just made a mistake. And they're also just flat out lying, because at no point are we ever supposed to be angry with these people. The slave owners in the first book it's some whole bullshit of trying to act like what Martha Wells thinks sci-fi is, but failing miserably because she doesn't know what she's fucking doing. So they're called Preservation Auxiliary Survey Team. Just Preservation or Preservation Ox. I'm just calling them the slave owners because they are. Because that needs to be fucking emphasized, because the books don't want you to care about that. These are people who this basically an Anon person is just fucking lying, because these are not just regular people who live in this whole system. And it would be fucked up enough for regular people to be going out renting out slaves. Like, anybody with morals can tell you, renting out a slave, meaning you are now purposefully a fucking slave owner, that is inherently immoral. That conflicts inherently with you being a good person. You cannot do both. You can't be a slave owner and a nice person. You can't rent out slaves to use as a fucking meat shield or for any other reason and to be a good person. These are completely contradictory fucking things. And this person is purposefully lying to everybody that is reading this post who has not read these books, and they're trying and failing to lie to me by pretending that these people are they're just doing their best in a shitty system that won't let them make any good choices, except that's literally not fucking true, because the whole thing about the slave owners from the first book, the preservation team, I can't really think of any equivalent. They're like the equivalent of somebody from, we'll just pretend there's a made up fucking, why are you angry at me? Zulfer, don't be mean to me. We're not in danger. It's fine. We got this. The whole entire thing about these slave owners in book one is that they specifically are not people who are forced to work in this system of slavery. They live on a magical socialist utopia that doesn't enslave the kind of robots that Murderbot is. They just enslave the fully mechanical robots. They don't need to be at this planet doing this survey, and you'll notice that me demanding this person explain to me why they were there if they think that they just had no choice in the matter and just had to do this to accomplish their goals. And that's because these people are only on a survey because Martha Wells is just ripping off shit she's seen in actually well-written sci-fi franchises like Alien, where they go on surveys to unexplored planets so they can all get eaten by xenomorphs. Except the people in those movies are on these planets for a reason. Sometimes that reason is the company hijacked their fucking ship and made them land there. Sometimes the reason is, hey, that'd be a cool place to terraform or something like that. So yeah, the people in this story, the slave owners, they're on a survey for no reason. We are never given a single reason for why they are here. Besides it's what you do in sci-fi, right? We literally they're not here. They're not on this planet doing a survey for any reason at all. We've had 7 fucking books to get any bare minimum explanation of what they were trying to do on this planet, because we're like, a whole big thing is made about the fact that they don't like the corporation rim, and they're not from the corporation rim. They're from the socialist utopia where everybody has equal rights except for the fucking robots, but they lie about that to you, and we're then supposed to pretend that they never lied because we're supposed to just see these characters as pure cinnamon rolls. This person is lying about so many fucking things, including the fact that these people went out of their way for no reason. We are literally never given any reason in 7 whole books. You would think it would come up in book 1, but it doesn't, because Martha Wells is fucking bad at writing and thinks that, oh, people just go on surveys. They don't need a reason for it, right? It's just a thing you do in sci-fi. That's just how you set up everybody to get eaten by the xenomorph. They don't need a reason for it, do they? Except yes, you fucking do. Even if the reason is literally just the fucking company hijacked your computer and sent you out here specifically to get this fucking xenomorph for them. But you don't know about that. Like, that's a reason. But these slave owners have purposefully gone out of their way. If we pretend there's a magical island next to North America, we'll pretend there's a magical socialist utopia island next to North America in the 1700s or whatever. And then this is the equivalent of people coming from that island when they don't need anything over here in North America, but they just come over here for shits and giggles and rent out a slave to use as a meat shield, and then lie to that slave about everything, and then are presented to us as the audience as just pure cinnamon rolls who've done nothing wrong and just didn't know what slavery is. Oh boy. Yeah, we'll be the Floppy Pack. I'll go find Floppy to show you guys. I don't know if she's always there or not. What was I saying before that distracted me? Yeah, we're never, these characters are never presented as morally complex, and the fact that they made a selfish decision as this person is trying to claim, and just are trying to make up for it. No, they're literally just presented as pure cinnamon rolls who were just completely innocent, despite the fact that they were lying in the first book. And we're literally never meant to think of that. They're not complex characters. They are as flat as fucking cardboard. They are as flat as a character can be. And we are not supposed to see them as people who fucked up and made bad decisions and were selfish. We're supposed to think they're just innocent, pure cinnamon rolls who just had no clue that the enslaved people that they were renting out were people, and that they just didn't know it would be bad to treat it like a fucking inanimate object for weeks, maybe months. I don't remember. I'm too lazy to open the book. I already put it back on the freaking bookshelf. I'm not getting out again. So this person is just lying about so many things, and that's why I was demanding an answer to why tell me why these people are here, because we never find out. But the non-reasons that they were on this planet, literally no reason at all, is supposed to be, we're not even supposed to care, because we're not supposed to care about anything these people do that is bad. Like lying and pretending that they don't know that slavery is bad, like lying and telling the slave that they've just bought that slaves have equal rights back on their planet, even though they know that's a lie and they are fucking lying about it. We are literally not supposed to think anything about these characters except they're awesome people who've never done anything wrong and are just it just got in over their heads, or not even that, really. Like, the story doesn't want you to be upset with them. The story doesn't want you to acknowledge that they fucking lied. The story doesn't want you to really think about them unless you're thinking, oh, they're such cute little pure cinnamon rolls. Yeah, of course they should be protected. They're awesome people. Go all the way back here. I forget what I was saying. Besides that person is lying, because these people there's never any explanation given for why they thought it was okay to rent out a slave. And this is part of the slavery apologism. This is why this is part of the I will get people literally just repeating the slavery apologism verbatim, exactly as it happens in the book, and then acting like this means it's not racist because they just said it again in slightly different words. These people, these slave owners, went out of their way to rent out a slave. They could have spent their whole lives on their shitty so-called socialist utopia planet where slavery is still a thing with the fully mechanical robots, but not the partially human ones. So they could have spent their whole fucking lives there and never done anything. And this fucker is acting like the only way. This fucker is just lying about so many things and about basic storytelling and everything. It's just absolutely fucking pathetic. And these people went out of their way. They left their shitty fake utopia, socialist dystopia where you can get free fruit in any building, but don't ask why the robots are second-class citizens and have to be legally owned and are not seen or treated as real fucking people. Don't even get me started. I cannot talk about fucking fugitive telemetry now. Oh my god, it's so bad. Martha Wells wrote these characters to be people who are fundamentally perfectly fine with slave owning, with renting out a slave, with going out of their way to rent out a slave. Like, do you know how big space is? Do you know how big a light year is? Do you know how far the distance is between planets? Because these people don't even all just live in one single star system. It's not like they're in the solar system. They're out there in uncharted space that's never gonna get any world building. Is this not the den? Oh, yeah, I got it. They had to go out of their way to rent a slave for literally no fucking reason. Because we still don't have a fucking reason for why they thought this was okay. These are slave owners. These are people okay with going out of their way to rent a slave, and they don't even have a reason for it. Like, it's not even a morally gray bullshit of, if they didn't rent out Murderbot, then 1 trillion people would die. Wait, I can just name the den space. I don't have names lined up. Fuck. What? I was not expecting that. I thought we were just gonna have one. Well, I don't have any names, so they'll get names as they get personalities. That's crazy. It's literally not expecting that at all. Get out here, little babies. So, these are characters that are fundamentally have no problem with going so far out of their way. Yeah, I was talking about how big space is, because it's supposed to be a space opera or whatever the fuck they call it. It's fucking not. Even back when I still liked this series and tolerated it instead of just giving up because nobody in the fandom would rather implode than admit there's anything wrong with the series. And anytime that happens, like, this could be a fun series if only people would actually admit anything is wrong with it at all, instead of literally, like, the fandom would rather implode through toxic positivity and all of this shit than just say, yeah, it's got some fucked up shit and it's filled with nothing but stereotypes. But these people, these slave owners, they have to come from several star systems away. They have to go so far out of their way, and they're willing to do that, and they're willing to rent out a slave, and we are never even given any reason. It's not even, they gotta do it because there's some disease on their planet that's gonna kill 1 trillion people unless they rent out a slave, because that's the only way they're allowed to go to this planet to do the survey to try and find the cure. There's not even anything like that. And, like, that would still be fucking horrible unless the literal whole entire plan is to go there and then immediately rescue every fucking slave they can find and free them. But it's not even that. We just don't know why they went so far out of their fucking way to rent a slave, because we're not supposed to care, because they are not supposed to be morally complex characters. They're just supposed to be pure cinnamon rolls that we love and want Murderbot to protect. That's it. That's their purpose. As I said, Martha Wells told people, why would you ever fucking tell anybody this? She told people that the original plan was to have Murderbot heroically and tragically die to protect them. They exist for no purpose but to be pure cinnamon roll slave owners that we are supposed to like and want to protect. Because Martha Wells doesn't understand that being a slave owner and being a good person and being a character that you want your audience to love and enjoy, not as a character but as a person who's a pure cinnamon roll who's never done anything wrong, is fucking bad. Your characters can't be good people if they're slave owners, but that's what she expects us to see them as. There is a difference, and yes, for all the fucking jackasses out there, There's a difference between a character being a good character and being a good person. Scorpius from Farscape is a good character, and he's a horrific fucking person. He tortures the main character. He bought 100,000 fucking slaves because he only wanted one specific one of them to use as a hostage, but could only fucking buy them in a set of 100,000. So he murdered the other 999,000. I'm getting those numbers wrong. Shut up, you get the point. 999. He literally only wanted one of them. So he bought the whole fucking set and then killed every single other one of them. Because he's a horrible fucking person. And you're supposed to see him as a horrible fucking person. He's okay with slavery. He's okay with literally buying, I don't remember if it was 100,000 or 10,000, some number of one ending in zeros, slaves, and kill all of them except for the one that he wanted as a hostage. He could have freed them all. That would have caused him literally no fucking problems. But he just fucking executed them all instead because he's a fucking horrible person. And he's a good character because he's the villain. That's why he's doing these horrible fucking villainous things. Because his job is to be the character that you fucking hate. That's literally what a villain is for. That's why he buys slaves. That's why he tortures people. That's why he manipulates people. That's why he puts a fucking brain chip in the protagonist's head that prevents the protagonist from fighting back and attacking him after he's tortured him. He's a villain. That's why he does these horrible things. But Martha Wells's characters are little slave owners who do horrible fucking things. But we're not supposed to see these things as bad. We're not supposed to see them as bad people despite them literally being so okay with slavery that they will go so far out of their way to do it. Because Martha Wells is racist. She is a white author who thinks that a character can go out of their way to do slavery, knowing full well what they are doing is slavery and wrong, and then thinks she can also have these characters lie about not knowing that that's what they're doing. And then they're still supposed to be good people, just pure cinnamon rolls that we don't think about too deeply and don't have any problem with any of their behavior because they're just supposed to be cute little cinnamon rolls who've never done anything wrong, despite the fact that they went so far out of their way to get a fucking slave for nothing, for no purpose at all. We literally have had 7 books and we still have not gotten a single fucking explanation for why they were there, why that first book even fucking happened. And then they're still supposed to just be treated as good people even though they lied to the slave that they went out of their way to rent out. And it's like, these are completely fucking incompatible things. If you want your characters to be pure cinnamon rolls who've never done anything wrong in their lives, you can't have them be fucking slave owners. You cannot have them go literally out of their way to buy and rent fucking slaves and engage in slavery. You can't then, even on top of that, as if that weren't bad enough, literally have them lie. And to both the character and the audience, because of your shit writing and your fucking refusal to just have basic continuity checks before you publish new books. You have them lie, not only to the character, but the audience, about whether or not they knew that what they were doing was wrong. Oh. And then just expect your audience to treat these characters as just pure innocent cinnamon rolls who've never done anything wrong. This is last year. This is a yearling. I'm gonna get it. It doesn't really count because it's on easy mode, but I'm gonna get it. there's a very fucking common thing of writings by white people. You'll notice it in how many fucking vampires or of characters of vampires in particular, because they get to be immortal, so they can commit fucking crimes against humanity even after they would have originally died of old age. Think of how many stories there are about vampires. Vampire characters we're supposed to like, and they fought on the side of the fucking Confederates in the American Civil War. They literally fought on the side to uphold slavery. And we're supposed to think that's totally normal and just an interesting backstory and not a forever condemnation of them as a fucking person. We're supposed to be okay with the fact that they literally fought to keep slavery in America. And, at least as far as that, slavery shall be blah blah blah, except as punishment for a crime. Oh, gotta howl. I always forget this part. Let's just, it'll probably work because it's easy mode. I can still get hurt, but we'll find out. So many white authors just think that it's not actually a deal breaker for a character to be both a slave owner and a good person. There's a difference between a good person and a good character. The Preservation Aux team could be good characters, but they can't be good people because they're okay with slavery. But Martha Wells doesn't want us to have a problem with the fact that these are people who are okay with slavery, and not, again, I can't stress enough, they're not just okay with the slavery. They went out of their way to get a slave. Let me turn off mate death. Okay, it is off already. I was gonna say I like her. Not just okay with slavery. They've made it even worse by lying about it to the audience and the character, so that we, the audience, are not supposed to be upset with them in book 1 because we're told they just had no clue. They don't know what these newfangled constructs are. They just thought it was the equivalent of a toaster or something. You don't treat a toaster like a person, do you? That's what we're told in book 1. And then the entire rest of the series exists to prove that they were fucking lying through their teeth. Both to Murderbot and to us, the fucking audience. That fucking basically an anon is like, they never said that Murderbot shouldn't be mad at them, and it's like, you are just fucking lying. They don't have to explicitly say, don't be mad at us. They have to just say, we didn't know any better. Because that's saying, don't be mad at us. It's not our fault. We just didn't know any better. We didn't know you were a person. How could we have known that? Except they were fucking lying. So they're okay with slavery. They're okay with going so far out of their way, so unbelievably far out of their way, to rent a slave for something that they don't need. And then they lie to the protagonist about it, and the audience, and we, the audience, are just supposed to see them as silly little pure cinnamon rolls who need to be protected. And this is why it's slavery apologism. You're supposed to be okay with the slave owners. You're supposed to look at the slave owners who lied to the slave, and you're supposed to think, yeah, they need to be protected. I don't even remember the original whole cinnamon roll meme format. So innocent, so pure, something like that. That's how you're supposed to see these people. Not as morally complex people who fucking are okay with slavery and only change their mind when they realized, oh damn, it is a person, as this basically an anon is trying to imply. They're just adding so much fucking nuance into the story that's literally not fucking there. We're not supposed to, they never fucking admit, yeah, we told ourselves we could go along with it until we saw your face. Like, that person is just lying about so many things, it's ridiculous. And it's just like, This is literally just repeating back the slavery apologism that I'm talking about, as though repeating it again means it's not slavery apologism, and therefore doesn't need to be criticized. People do this all the fucking time with, like, every time I criticize something that Martha Wells has written. Like the fact that she says in the books of the Raxura, if you think it's wrong for people to be enslaved and oppressed based on a fucking case system that determines everything about what you're allowed to do from the moment you're born, if you have a problem with this, it means you're a mentally ill serial killer. And then the fandom tries to disprove this basic statement of what is written in the book by saying, oh, you trust the serial killer? You trust the mentally ill psychopathic serial killer? You think he wants equal rights? You think he's fighting for equality? The serial killer? And it's like, you guys are literally just, that's you are literally just proving the thing I just fucking said. She literally says that the only fucking person we ever see saying, hey, yeah, it's a caste system is bad, literally restricting people about what they're allowed to do in life, and including who they're allowed to fall in love with based on how they're born, is evil and fucked up and bad, and we should not do that. And he's portrayed as a serial killer. And the fandom thinks that going, you think the serial killer is fighting for equality? They think that this is somehow proving the statement wrong, even though they're literally just repeating it exactly as it is in the books. Because Martha Wells literally is just a fucking racist, but she uses non-human characters to do all of the racist shit with. And apparently, I guess the only way anybody, well, only way any white queer people would give a fuck about her racism is if she comes out at some point and starts really being explicit about hating trans people and thinking that sex equals gender and all of this crap. Because that's the only reason white queer people care about the racism in that J.K. Rowling has done. Because Martha Wells is doing the exact same fucking shit she did and pretending it's progressive because it's queer. Wait, wrong button. Come back out. Wrong button, babies. And pretending it's progressive because it's got queer characters that are only queer because that's the norm for their whole entire species built into their biology. And using racist tropes that have been outdated since the 90s, since before the fucking 90s. Mewtwo quote. And it's just ridiculous. There's so much shit wrong in the Murderbot Diaries that nobody ever acknowledges. And there's so much shit that's just patently absurd. There's so many contradictory things. And why do people think that repeating the slavery apologism means it's not slavery apologism? Like, telling me that you think the slave owners are just pure innocent cinnamon rolls that should be forgiven for everything and just treated as just good people. That's because you've fallen for the slavery apologism, because the series fundamentally is not about caring about slaves. Because if it was, her whole entire original plan wouldn't be for the slave to heroically, tragically kill itself to protect the slave owners. Why would you fucking tell anybody that that was your original plan? Why would you fucking tell anybody that white supremacist fucking dream of yours was the original fucking plan? Until you realized that was too sad and you could make more money by keeping the slave alive to continue worshipping the slave owners. Why the fuck would you tell anyone that? And why the fuck has she just been allowed to say shit like this without anybody pointing out, wow, that is fucking fucked up? Like, if the Murderbot Diaries were a competent series written by somebody who actually knows how to fucking write and actually cares about oppressed people, including people oppressed by slavery, then the Preservation Ox team would be the fucking villains. Because anybody who actually gives a shit about enslaved people, instead of concerning themselves with worshipping literal slave owners, you wouldn't have to be told that the people who've gone out of their way to rent out a slave and don't even treat it like a person despite knowing it's a fucking person are bad people that should be gotten away from, that Murderbot deserves to fucking run away from to safety, instead of the entire series literally existing to show that Murderbot made the bad choice by running away from them at the end of book 1. Literally the whole series is now, like, book 1, it would have been bad, but it would have been bearable if it was just a standalone story all by itself. But the entire rest of the series, as I said, exists to show that Murderbot made the wrong choice by escaping to freedom, and Murderbot is literally just procrastinating about going back to the slave owners that it still loves and adores and wants to protect more than anything else in life. And Martha Wells just casually revealed in the interview bodily autonomy in the Murderbot Diaries, which is part of Friction Literature's, it's called a magazine, but I think it's a hardcover book. It's a hardback. Hardcover, yeah. It's a hardcover book, but it's called a magazine, and it acts like a magazine. Just casually revealed in the interview that it's a fake interview with herself talking to her own characters, and like, it's called Bodily Autonomy in the Murderbot Diaries. And like, the literal first thing she does in this interview with herself, where she pretends to be her characters talking to her, the very first thing she does, I want to just give you like 10 seconds while I circle these bears to try and think of like the most absurd thing that you could do in a format of this style. So, okay, so imagine it. You, an author, you're writing a thing called Bodily Autonomy in insert the title of your story. You're going to be interviewing your protagonist and another character. What's the most absurd thing you can think of that you could do in the situation in an interview called Bodily Autonomy in insert your book title? Just think of your two favorite characters. Think of your main character and think of your second favorite character alongside your protagonist. Pretend you're going to interview them in an interview called Bodily Autonomy. What's the most absurd thing you can think of that you could do in a situation like this? Genuinely think about it. You don't have to comment. I don't give a fuck about YouTube's algorithm bullcrap, but just think about it. And I'll tell you what Martha Wells does in this interview titled Bodily Autonomy in the Murderbot Diaries, where she's supposed to be interviewing Murderbot and Art. She decides, it's the very first thing of the interview, to sexually harass Murderbot so that it leaves the conversation, and thus the entire fucking interview, and doesn't come back. That's her go-to decision. Literally sexually harass the actual main character out of the conversation instantly, so that it doesn't get to say anything for itself, even though it's the main fucking character, and this is supposed to be an interview about bodily autonomy, and she decides to sexually harass it out of the conversation, and then it never comes back. So then the entire conversation, which is supposed to be about bodily autonomy, is Martha Wells and her actual favorite character, ART, is very clearly her pet character that she likes more than everybody else in the Murderbot Diaries and wants everybody else to like more than everybody else. Like, it's really fucking obvious. And so the conversation about bodily autonomy in the Murderbot Diaries starts with the protagonist being sexually harassed out of the conversation entirely, so that it doesn't actually get to exert any autonomy, bodily or otherwise, by participating in this conversation and getting to speak for itself. I can't even imagine coming to this decision, let alone considering it, let alone going through with it. She literally starts the conversation off by sexually harassing Murderbot until it leaves, like literally chasing it out of the fucking interview, despite the interview promising that she'd be interviewing two of her most popular characters. But literally, before Murderbot gets to say anything, it gets sexually harassed out of the conversation and doesn't come back, and then the entire rest of the conversation is just two other people talking about it, because it's not even allowed to have autonomy in the fake fucking interview. Literally, not even in this fake fucking interview is Murderbot allowed to actually speak for itself. And I know there is a reason for this, because Martha Wells keeps doing it. She's done other fake interviews like this, fake in-character interviews, where she's interviewing Murderbot and Art. Somebody asked, I don't remember what year this was, but somebody asked, this cute little baby's chasing me like a little cutie. Wish they'd add little running animation for you to, they're so cute. Somebody else asked in some other in-character interview like this, asked what Murderbot's pronouns are. And instead of having Murderbot answer the question, ART answered it's for both of them. So Murderbot literally doesn't actually ever get to speak for itself, even though that's the whole fucking purpose of these fake little fucking interviews that are not actually being spoken by real people. Like, this isn't a real person getting to choose to have their friend answer for them. This is Martha Wells going out of her way to make it so that the protagonist has never told a single fucking person, not even in fake in-character interviews that only exist on the internet. These aren't in the actual books. Murderbot has never told anybody that it actually uses the pronouns it's, and that those are its chosen pronouns. And the reason for this is Martha Wells wants to give the bigots in the fandom who hate non-binary people plausible deniability, so that she can keep getting their money without driving them away by being actually progressive in any way. Because the bigots in the fandom are totally fine with Murderbot being it's and non-binary, because it is literally a robot, so as far as we're fucking told, that doesn't have genitals, so it can't have a sex. So it doesn't have a gender. That's fine with them, because that's just biological essentialism. And she's just going to keep doing this plausible deniability bullshit as long as she can, because if she doesn't have Murderbot ever say, my pronouns are it's, then that gives the fandom permission to keep misgendering it, because she refuses to actually have the character ever tell anybody, even in shitty little fake interviews, that it actually uses those pronouns. Also, before book 7, System Collapse came out, the word pronoun didn't exist in this series at all, because at no point has anybody ever told another character what their pronouns are, or anything, or even explained to somebody else that Murderbot's pronouns are it's. Everybody just magically assumes, even when they don't know that it's a construct, because magical bullshit, bad writing, biological essentialism. The only reason Murderbot is non-binary, uses its pronouns, and is aro ace, is because it's literally a sexless robot. It's literally just the stereotype of the non-binary robot, the aro ace robot. No fucking shit, the robot that doesn't have genitals is aro ace and uninterested in sex, because that's literally just biological essentialism. And like, you could have actual fucking conversations to do about this if Martha Wells gave a shit about anything. You could have conversations about oppressed people being literally, physically desexualized. But no. We're just going to do biological essentialism and stereotype non-binary and aro-ace people as being literal, sexless robots. So, and which, because we have zero fucking non-binary or aro-ace humans who actually appear for more than 2 seconds, just long enough to get the hopes of kids reading these books hopes up, while not long enough to completely piss off the conservatives whose money she also wants. This means that the only way to be non-binary is to literally be born without genitals, without an Adam's apple, without breasts, without any gender or sex signifiers at all, according to this series. That's the only way you can be non-binary, because Martha Wells just hates trans people and doesn't actually want to represent us in her stories. She just wants to do biological essentialism that equates sex, what genitals you have, with your gender, with your pronouns, with your sexuality. Of course, Murderbot is aro-ace, because it's a literal fucking robot that has no sex or gender related parts. It's just biological essentialism and harmful fucking stereotypes that have existed and been old for decades now. Long before 2017. But because she hasn't come out explicitly and said, I think your gender is whatever you were, whatever genitals you have, whether you want to change them or not, then nobody's ever gonna call her out on it. Apparently, besides me and like a few other people. But see, the problem is, like, there are a few people who see the problems with the series, but they don't stick around and read the rest to see the rest of the problems or talk about it, because they just go, wow, that's shit. That's another useless fucking stereotype filled pile of garbage I'm not going to waste my time on. But I did waste my time on it because I had hopes that after book 1 we would finally get to see some slaves and have the moral be Murderbot has been a horrible fucking person this whole time, defending slavery and murdering people. But no, it's been 7 whole goddamn books, and we still haven't even gotten to the part where we admit that the other slaves are all people and that they've all been getting fucking slaughtered this whole time, like they're non-existent fucking mindless entities. So yeah, that's that post from Tumblr. This video's 2.5 hours long. I still haven't even remembered to make a video specifically about all the fucking misogyny, because there's so much misogyny. It's just ridiculous. But that's it. Bye bye.